Um, I wanted to create a little tutorial here how to get a build environment working for your Bukkit plugins. So I'm going to make a few assumptions that you've installed your JDK. If you're running Windows, if you're running Mac, you don't need to do that. You know how to install Eclipse, that kind of thing. So, oh, and also that you've got Craft Bukkit downloaded and you know how to run a server. If you don't know how to do that, go and Google it, because I'm not gonna cover it. What you will need to do, though, I recommend, is when you create um, your build environment, create a directory called Bukkit or development or whatever, and in there, set that to be your workspace for Eclipse. So when Eclipse first starts, it'll ask you, where do you want to save the workspace? Save it into there in a subdirectory. You can actually create a new workspace by going switch workspace, so you can have a separate workspace for your Bukkit plugins and another workspace for something else if you want. So that's one way you can separate things out. The other thing you should do is then have like a server directory or something like that that's in the same top level directory, and that's basically got your Craft Bukkit jar file in there. The other thing you'll need to download is the Bukkit jar file. So obviously you want to grab the latest recommended build of the Bukkit jar, and that's what you link against. Your application links against that, but it is loaded by the Craft Bukkit jar file. So you download that, save it to, and again I recommend you put it into the same directory as Craft Bukkit, just to make it easy to find these things. Don't bother renaming it or anything like that. Just keep it that default name. And then, here's one. I'll delete that one. Don't need that. Then in Eclipse, you want to build a new plugin, right? So the best thing to do is go to either File, New, or right-click in the Package Explorer, whatever you do. New Java project. Call it something, and we're going to call this one Test Plugin. It doesn't really matter. I mean, obviously you might have a name for your project. You want to use that. You don't need to change any of the settings here. Just press Finish. In the source directory, this is where we're going to put all of the resources that are going to go into the plugin. So we need a package to put our code in, and the package name should be a domain. It should be backwards, and if you don't have a domain, you can use your email address. The convention is to use your email address, but replace the @ symbol with a dot. So my email's not Chrome, but whatever. And then use test plugin, like that. So in lowercase, because we're going to put the class as test plugin. Please ignore my wife talking to babies. Okay, so in there we're going to need a class. That's going to be the actual test plugin class. So that's the plugin that's going to be loaded by Bukkit. So we create that file. The other file we're going to need in there is a plugin.yml file. By the way, if you find that YML files are being opened by WordEdit or something like that, and you want to make it open inside Eclipse, it's quite easy to do. Just go to your Eclipse preferences, and then search for the file associations thing, and you just need to make a new association for YML and associate the text editor to that. And what that'll do is it'll make sure that whenever you click on a file like that's .yml, it'll open it in the text editor here. So that's the basic, basic structure. Obviously, this code is not enough to be a plugin. So what I recommend you do is go to the sample plugin. Okay, sample plugin is in the GitHub for Bukkit, so github.com/bukkit/sample plugin. In the source directory, main. Just keep digging in to the Java code. These guys, they like to really, break things out. I'm not a huge fan of this kind of level of structure. Now they've got a bunch of Java files. We don't need all of that. We're only going to use the basic code. And in fact, all of this stuff, we don't need all of that. But we'll copy it anyway, because it's good to kind of see it. And paste it in there. Now we want to keep this package because that's the package for our project, but we're going to redefine that. So we'll delete that, and we'll delete the package that we pasted in here. And they've called it sample plugin. We're going to call it test plugin. Okay, and you notice there's a whole bunch of errors here next to these import statements. That's because we haven't added Bukkit yet to our project. So you need to right click on your project, go to properties, build path, add an external jar, find your Bukkit jar, not the craft Bukkit one, the Bukkit jar, because that's the one you want to link to. Click OK. And that all turns good now because it knows what these things are, org.bukkit, etc. These other things, we don't actually want to implement any of this, so I'm just going to delete code that I'm not interested in. Note that you probably shouldn't use system.out anymore. You should probably be using the logger class. We'll add that in later. And we don't need these methods because that was part of the sample plugin stuff. Yeah, don't need any of that. The other thing that Eclipse is warning us about is these unused bits of code. Now, there's two things you could do. Now, if you want to keep them and just leave them unused for the time being, you can disable the warnings, or you can just delete that code if it's unused. So I'm going to delete it for now because really all we want is that. Okay, so that's our basic structure. We've got plugin.yml. We need to populate that. So let's grab the plugin.yml. And that's in the resources directory. And we're just going to grab this bit because we're not going to implement any commands yet. Called sample plugin. We're going to create our test plugin. Main is the main class for your plugin, so that it instantiates a copy of that class and then executes, the various code in there as required. So we're using com.gmail.foo.test plugin.test plugin, proper cat. That's the class name, and then that's the package. Okay, and we're going to set a version of 0.1. Okay, so this is a basic structure of a plugin, and that will actually work. So if we want to create the jar file for that, all we have to do is right click on our project, click export, and we use a jar file. Click next. The defaults here are correct. The only thing is you will need to select this. It will be unselected by default. Give it a name. So in this case, it used the setting that I had there before, but you will need to browse to your plugins directory and set the file name that you want to save to. Go next, save the description. It's very useful. Click your project, then the file name, test plugin.jar.desk. Okay, so this is basically these settings for exporting the jar again. Oh, baby just sneezed. Very funny. Okay. Baby's allowed. So there we go, there's our plugin. And that actually works. So if I start up the server, you can see test plugin version 0.1 is enabled. That's what we expect to see when you start or do a reload. Okay. And that's one way of building your project. The other way, which I prefer, is a little bit more involved, but it's totally worth it because it saves you from having to do right-click, create jar every time you want to build your plugin. That is perfectly fine. Some people are happy with that. I kind of find it annoying to do that constantly. So, go to your sample plugin directory. In there's a build.xml. We want to grab all of that XML code. And then you want to create a new file in the root of your project. Call it the same thing, build.xml. Oops. Placed it in the right place. There we go. And then you need to set the project name to the name of your project. It's not really that important, but you probably should do it. And then the plugin name here, that's it appends.jar. Okay, so you need to probably set that to the right place. Now, the reason why I said that you should create your workspace and your server in the same directory is to make this easier. So now all I need to do is, because I know it's in the project directory, I go back one, and it goes to workspace, and then go back to the top, and that goes to Bukkit directory. So then I want to go into server. You get me? Server. And then this is the dependency. So obviously we need to tell Ant, which is the thing that's going to build the project for you, where to find that Bukkit jar. Otherwise, it won't be able to compile because it's not going to be able to link to any of the classes you've associated. And if you add any other jars to your project, like permissions or whatever, you need to add them in here to the class path. So you need to create a new path element location for each of the new jar files that you're linking to in your project if you add anything third party. Plugins directory, it's the same location except /plugins, so that's where we're going to deploy stuff to. We want the default, because dist just compiles it, it doesn't actually deploy it into the deployment directory. We're going to set that to deploy, so that means that the default will be to build it and then to deploy it to the server. The other thing is, because the project that they give you in the sample plugin, they've got all this, these what's the word? Subdirectories for install, for the main/main/java and the /main/resources, etc. They've got this in here. I take that out because I've got it all in the top level, right? So we don't need to do that. Again, you've got to do that here as well for the plugin.yml file. Okay. And that's it. That's all the edits you need to do for this XML file. Then you need to tell Eclipse about that build.xml. So again, right click on your project, go to properties, go to builders, click a new builder. You want an Ant builder, call it something. Ant builder probably isn't a bad thing. Browse the workspace for the build file. So click on the project, click build.xml, go to targets. After a clean, it will use the default target. After a manual build, it'll do for a manual builder to do the default target. Auto build currently doesn't do anything. We want auto build to actually build the default target. You click set targets, you go to, it automatically selects deploy. So you don't need to do anything other than press OK, then apply. Okay, so why does it do that? Wow, I've seen that second time that it's done that tonight. Okay. Babies are funny. Okay, so that's set that correctly. Alright, I'm not going to mess with that anymore. Ant builder. Click OK. And as you can see, this console window just popped up and it built the project. And it took 155 milliseconds. It created the jar file in there, right? Created it, and then it copied it to the correct location, which is great. By the way, you probably don't need any of that, so you can minimize it. Make some more room for your code. If you want, you might want to do something like that. That way you can see if the builds are successful. Up to you. Okay, so we've actually got it automatically building now. So that built a jar file for us. Let's make sure it still works. Look at that. Goodbye world, test plugin enabled. Now I don't like these messages. In fact, I'm going to fix that. This is why I like Eclipse. The pop-up stuff is great. Get logger Minecraft dot test plugin. Okay, so we've got a logger called log. It's automatically imported it for us. Thank you very much. And we are going to do that. Oh, it's unused. Oh no. I'm going to do log.info string.format. Let's do versions s disabled, and we'll do PDF file dot get name, comma PDF file dot get here we go. Oops. Oops, missing a bracket. Okay, that's great. I like that. There we go. So you probably should use logger instead of doing system.out.println. And it just built it because I saved it. So let's see what that looks like when I do a reload. Oh, look at that. Test plugin version 0.1 enabled. Do another reload. Does the disabled enable? That's all there is really to setting up automated builds in Eclipse for a Bukkit plugin. Now obviously the whole exercise about how to write a plugin is quite involved, and you need to learn Java, you need to learn the Bukkit API, and there's nothing I can do in a 10-minute tutorial on how to do that. Good luck.